Virtualization is a pretty new concept for some, but it's actually been around for quite a while. Virtualization really truly began back in the late 60s at IBM, where they used to virtualize part of their operating system to run multiple applications. So it's been around for quite some time. These days, virtualization is known to us usually through things like VirtualBox or VMware. This course centers around VMware, and I want to go into just a little bit about what virtualization really is. Back in the day, we would run multiple applications across a variety of different physical servers. So one server would be a database server, one server would be an application server, another server would be doing email. So we'd have all these different servers performing these different tasks. And it made sense to do it that way because we didn't necessarily have the luxury of running multiple tasks simultaneously on the same physical box. Even though the operating systems themselves would have allowed us to do it, the reality is there may be conflicting capabilities within the products. They may use certain resources differently than another. We may discover that the server was built to do one particular thing. When we asked it to do more than what it was originally built to do, which was often the case, we would end up overloading that machine. Of course, then that led to people saying, well, let's just only have one product run on a server, and we'll basically put one product on a server and that's it. We're just going to run one for one. Well, the problem with that is that we end up with a lot of hardware that doesn't get fully utilized. So we have a lot of servers humming along, and things look really wonderful from the end user's point of view, but if you were to actually look at the data center, it's loaded with hardware, and maybe a lot of that hardware really only runs at about 10% of its utilization. Even during peak load, maybe it's only 20% used. So it's overbuilt, which is a good thing because we didn't want it to be underbuilt, but we end up with a lot of waste. And it's even more so during idle times. So what virtualization helps us to do is to take this physical server that we've got here that's running only one thing, and yes, I know it says Windows Server 2003 and Microsoft Exchange, but it's the concept that's important here. One physical server doing one thing. With virtualization and VMware's hypervisor, we end up with the same physical server, but this particular software layer is allowing us to break up the workload in such a way that each one gets compartmentalized and isolated into a virtual machine. So we can have a web server and a database server and a file server and a Java server, although Java server is really more like Tomcat servers these days and Jetty and stuff like that. And of course our email server, but the same physical box is being much better utilized, way better return on investment. Maybe we only have to have like say a dozen servers as opposed to 6 dozen servers. For example, we used to run dozens of servers. Now we run far fewer, but we have many, many, many virtual machines. What this has allowed us to do is decrease the overall cost, right? Where there are fewer servers, so it costs less to replace them over time. It reduces the electrical load, it reduces the cooling load, and it allows us to get finer granularity of how much resource a product actually needs. So instead of overbuilding, we can right size it. So if we know something needs 20 gigs of memory and 4 CPUs, we give it that. But it also says in the same context, if it needs more, we can always give it more because the resources will simply be there. So let's take a look at some of the finer details of VMware. The visualization is really kind of cool because this icon represents the data center. So we have this colored area here, which kind of represents a computer room somewhere. For lack of a better term, we tend to use the term data center today, but many people can relate to a computer room is where all the computers are and the networking equipment and stuff like that. Now a cluster is a group of machines that sort of act as one. So we see that there's this layer above here where all these virtual machines are sort of running on this cluster. We could also have an individual host, right? We don't have to have clusters. We can have a host, that runs multiple VMs, which is very similar to the first picture that we saw. And then, of course, we have the VM itself, which is the actual container of the operating system. It's self-contained. It's got its own resources, memory, CPU, hard disk, video. In the end, what are we doing? Well, we're taking the concept of the physical equipment, CPUs, memory, a keyboard, some kind of interface, whether it's a GUI or command line. There's all these different resources that we're utilizing. They're getting virtualized, and it's all being done in software now. So there are real CPUs, there is real memory, there's real disk, but we're carving it up in a different way. Overall savings in the data center, reduced electrical, reduced cooling, it all equals, a better investment in the end. And that's what virtualization is all about, trying to get the best investment possible. So as you go through the remainder of these videos, we're going to talk about a great deal more technology that's involved in here. I hope you find it as exciting as I do. And I think now we're going to have a little bit of a quiz.